All right, today we're going to talk about cell theory. Our goals here are to have you understand the parts of the cell theory, provide a little evidence for them, and then be able to understand the levels of organization. So, if you were in class, I had us do a card sort, and I gave you little pictures of things under the microscope and had you take a look and see if you could identify which ones had cells and which ones did not have cells. You were able to identify some that had cells and some that didn't. So this is kind of like the scientists who were back in the day, after they had invented microscopes, looking at things underneath the microscope. And they came to realize that some of them had these repeating patterns and shapes. And these repeating patterns and shapes oftentimes had a little dot in them that we now know is the nucleus. And they came to realize that these shapes they came to call cells. So all the living things they put under the microscope ended up having these cells. So the first part of the cell theory, which wasn't actually created until much later after scientists figured this out, is that all organisms are made of cells. So you're going to go ahead and write this down. Cell theory was something that was developed, I believe, in the 1800s. Basically, some different things that scientists had come up with regarding cells and figured out over the hundreds and hundreds of years, they put together in this idea called cell theory. So this was one of them. So how do we know? What evidence do we have? When you looked at the microscope lab, you guys looked at some stuff that used to be living, like perhaps some muscle, perhaps some bone or a corn leaf. And what did you notice? Well, all of those things that used to be living had cells. You should have seen cells there. Just like scientists figured this out by looking at stuff under the microscope and seeing that the living things had cells and the non-living things did not. So when we look at a microscope, living things have cells, non-living things do not have cells. I'm going to move on, but feel free to just pause the video so you can write. Next up, I want you to think of what does it mean if something is living or alive? What characteristics does something have to have? There's actually 7. They're made of cells, they have levels of organization, they use energy, respond to the environment, grow and develop, reproduce, adapt to the environment. We're not writing these down. I'm not testing you on these characteristics. The reason I bring them up is because remember our previous statement, this one, all organisms or living things are made of cells. We have to know what a living thing is. The next part of the cell theory is going to talk about this living thing and characteristics of living things as well. So if we take a look at the levels of organization here, which of these is considered living? What about an organism? What about organs? Are those living? What about cells? Are those living? What about atoms? Are those living? What do you think is the smallest one of these things that's still considered a living thing, meaning it has all the 7 characteristics? If you said cell, you're correct. So this is the second part. A cell is the smallest living thing. Sometimes I shorten it to a cell is the smallest living thing, but it's also a cell is the smallest living thing that can perform all the functions of life. So we're going to put the levels of organization down in our notes.
Today I'm going to show you
here. How did scientists figure this out? Well, when they looked at pond water or stuff under the microscope, they actually saw things that were just made out of one cell. So one-celled organisms, and they realized, hey, things can be one cell and still be alive. That's how they kind of figured this out. Skip this video, that's not working. All right, levels of organization. I don't need you to draw these pictures. I just need you to write down these words. So atom, organelle, these are from smallest to largest. Okay, so you're going to write down all these words. You can go ahead and pause it. After you write down these words, I want you to circle cell because a cell is the smallest living thing. The cool thing about this is that each level is made up of the things in the previous level. So for example, a tissue is made up of cells. A cell is made of organelles or parts. Organelles are made out of atoms. all of those. And so we can get the definitions right here.